Mr. L.V.Krishnan may have retired as Director of Safety Research and Health Physics Programs at the Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research at Kalpana in 1997. But that doesn't mean he has retired from life. He's a very busy and active person and is invited by many governments to talk about and share his expertise in nuclear safety gleaned over the years. Among other things, he has co-authored books and monographs and 18 scientific papers and presentations. To go through his very impressive CV, all one has to do is Google his name. Thank you, Mr. Krishnan, for agreeing to appear on KayCee's ViewSpot.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
The first question I'd like to ask you is, it's difficult to know where to start, but let's start with your last designation as Director of Safety Research in Kalpana. What exactly did the job entail?
Well, when you talk about safety of a nuclear reactor, you are looking at the very different ways in which things can go wrong during reactor operation, and whether in any of those instances radioactive material can be released into the environment,
Okay.
and then what kind of impact it could have on the people around,
Yeah.
on the environment in general,
Yeah.
and then how to keep it at a very minimum as possible.
Yeah, that's a very important job. I mean, you must have really gone through a lot of research.
It is indeed, because it involves a certain familiarity with the, let us say, the mechanical aspects of reactor design, construction and operation.
Yeah.
Then you have also got to be familiar with the various ways in which radiation can interact with life. So you have to have a certain degree of familiarity with the biological effects of radiation.
Yeah.
And you also have to know how radioactive material gets dispersed in the environment, the meteorological aspects.
It's almost like a jack of all trades and master of all of them.
Well, you have to be a master of all of them, but well, it's a difficult task, yes.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is, after the Fukushima incident in Japan this year, as a result of the earthquake and tsunami that followed, you were deluged with questions on the safety of Indian reactors should a similar type of incident occur. What was your answer to such a question?
Well, I think one must understand that the situation in Japan
Yeah.
is very different from Indian conditions.
Okay.
So Japan is an earthquake-prone country,
Yeah.
and the earthquakes occur very close to the country's shoreline, and
Yeah.
therefore they trigger a tsunami, and the tsunami hits the coastline very quickly after the earthquake.
Okay.
But in India,
Yeah.
the earthquakes, especially in the peninsular region,
Yeah.
are far less in severity,
Yeah.
and also any chance of tsunami can come only from earthquakes as far away as Sumatra. That gives sufficient time
Yeah.
for you to get a warning,
Yeah.
and also it reduces the intensity of the tsunami as it hits the coast.
Okay, so that means you have time to shut down the reactor and
Right,
things like
and
that.
also you don't really have to look for the impact of a tsunami of that high severity as you experienced in Japan.
But we never expected the Indian tsunami in 2004.
Right.
Maybe something like that could happen,
Right.
and maybe India could be the epicenter.
One other aspect about the Indian coastal conditions, especially on the eastern coast, is that we have very frequent cyclones.
Okay.
And these cyclones also result in storm surges.
Okay.
In fact, if you had provided for a storm surge,
Yeah.
you have almost provided for a tsunami as well, because the tsunami intensity is about the same as the storm surge.
Okay, so you feel that there's not as much to worry about as maybe
There may
a
be some
person-
lessons that we have to learn from
Yes.
the Japanese experience.
Yeah, what
but
are those lessons?
The lessons are that in Japan,
Yeah.
they had some of the vital equipment
Yeah.
in locations which are liable to be affected if the tsunami struck the coast.
Okay.
And I think, for instance, the emergency power supply,
Yeah.
the generator which was supposed to provide the emergency power supply was located in a place where the tsunami caused the whole place to be waterlogged, and then the generator was disabled. So I
Okay.
think we have to worry about such things.
Okay. And have steps been taken? Do you think?
Because we had been worrying about the storm surges, we have already had such conditions analyzed, and then we have provided the generator in a sufficiently safe location.
Okay. That's very good to hear. I mean, especially for people living near nuclear reactors here. Okay. What are the various ways in which a nuclear reactor operation could be adversely affected?
Generally speaking, when you analyze the safety of a particular nuclear reactor, you look for ways in which things can go wrong, either due to equipment failure
Okay.
or due to operator error.
Yeah.
And when you look for equipment failure, you look for not just failure in one particular system, you look for simultaneous failures in 2 or 3 systems.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of severity that you look for
Yeah.
in analyzing the safety of the system. Now, the operator error is a little more difficult to quantify because it involves man-machine interactions.
Yeah.
But what is required is the operators need to be licensed, they have to be periodically trained,
Yes.
and a certain degree of management
Okay.
is required. An excellence in management is required. And you have to make sure that the operators have the right attitude for operating the reactors.
Yes, that leads me to this question. I'm sure you need the best brains to be an operator. Is that so? Like, you know?
That's very true. That's
Yeah.
very true, because you see, what it requires is essentially an ability to analyze a situation
Quickly.
when you have an abnormal situation
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
and be able to come up with the right answers.
Yeah.
Now, in any case, I think in all our nuclear power plants,
Yeah.
the control room is manned by people who have a graduate degree in engineering,
Okay.
unlike in many other countries where they use technicians.
Yeah.
And you have several persons
Yeah.
with this kind of experience.
Yeah.
Somebody who's experienced in mechanical, somebody who's experienced in electrical systems and things like that. So it's possible for all of them to come together and then analyze the situation and come to a quick conclusion about what is to be done next.
So this control room, I'm sure, must be on 24/7.
Yes, of course it has to be.
Yeah. And quick decisions can be taken without having to go to policymakers.
There is another aspect also in this,
Yeah.
which has not been considered by many people.
Yeah.
In our country, we have a township
Yeah.
dedicated
Yeah.
for the people who man the power station.
Okay.
And the township is within 5 kilometers.
Yeah.
And so if required,
Yeah.
I think people can rush from the township to the power plant very quickly.
Okay.
Since all of them are in the township,
Yeah.
it's also possible for you to get them all together.
Yes.
In many other countries, people live in scattered places all over.
Yeah.
And at various distances.
Mhm.
To get them to the power station,
Yes.
it's a little more difficult.
Is that true for all the Indian nuclear reactors?
Yes, every nuclear power station has its own township.
Okay. Then one of the interesting questions would be how many nuclear reactors do we have? And of course, later on I would like to ask you about how many more we should have, but how many do we have right now?
Right now we have about 22 reactors.
Yeah.
And there are many more that are under construction.
Yeah.
And these certainly are not going to be adequate. So we need to build a lot many more.
Yeah. One of the things would be, a lot of people have misperceptions about nuclear energy. They think that it could be dangerous. That's what a lot of media might be feeding them. How do you go about dispelling this? That nuclear energy is something which is needed and required, and not as dangerous as some might think it is.
I think the danger of nuclear energy is arising because of the fear of nuclear radiation.
Okay.
And I do believe that the nuclear weapons, as the weapons were used against Japan and the Japanese cities, the kind of impact it had
Yeah.
has been etched in the memory of the people.
And even after all these decades, it still remains.
Right,
Yeah.
right. They see those pictures,
Yeah.
and they tend to think that the effect of an accident in a nuclear reactor would be similar to the effect of a nuclear weapon.
Okay.
And I don't think that is very true.
Yeah.
It is also true that the Chernobyl accident that happened in Ukraine has also left an impression in the minds of the people.
Yeah.
But well, I think these accidents that happened in Chernobyl and in the US also, they had certain causes.
Okay.
And I think if you can analyze those causes, we can get a picture about how to avoid those conditions. Now, when it comes to radiation,
Yeah.
you must also remember that radiation is present everywhere. Right now in this room, you and I are exposed to radiation
Okay.
in the air,
Yeah.
in the room,
Yeah.
from the walls of the room,
Okay.
construction materials.
Yeah.
And if you go to the beach in Madras, you get exposed to more radiation than you are than in your
Oh,
room
that
here.
means we should stay at home and not go and enjoy
No, I
ourselves
think
out there.
this is not something that is dangerous,
Yeah.
but the point is we must remember that it is there. The
Okay.
reason why I say it is that
Yeah.
because we have been living in a sea of radiation, natural radiation.
Okay.
The living systems have also got themselves adapted to a certain extent.
Little immune to
Right.
it. is it?
And therefore, the impression that radiation at any dose is harmful,
Yeah.
I think that doesn't really seem
That
to be,
needs to be dispelled.
yeah,
Okay.
sustained very well. Yeah.
Okay. When you were talking about the impact of, you talk mostly about the internal. Can you tell us about the external causes?
When it comes to external, in India we do take care of earthquakes and cyclones.
Okay.
Okay? The earthquakes that occur in India are not of that great severity as you have in Japan.
Okay.
So we are able to take care of the earthquakes of the known severity or magnitude.
Yeah.
And we do also extend it to magnitudes that have not been experienced so far, but we believe
Could
happen in the
Yes.
future. So that is taken care
What
of.
magnitude is that?
Well,
Up
the
to-
highest magnitude that we have seen are 8 in the Himalayan regions,
Okay.
and in the peninsular region it's about 6.
Okay.
And when you try to locate a particular reactor in a particular place,
Mhm.
you look for the history of earthquakes up to 300 kilometers
Okay.
from the location.
Okay.
And then you try to find out whether the maximum magnitude that you can expect
Yeah.
would have any adverse impact on this particular design. And you try to reinforce the structure to be able to withstand that magnitude earthquake.
Okay. You are the co-author of 3 books or monographs, one of which covers the history of atomic energy in India. I'm particularly interested in your latest monograph entitled Nuclear Power in India, The Road Ahead. I have 3 questions based on that. The first one is, what are your findings regarding this?
Well, our attempt in writing this monograph was to find out what is the extent to which we can build up the nuclear power in India in the space of about 20 years,
Okay.
and what would be the decision that would need to be taken
Okay.
in terms of how much money would need to be invested,
Mhm.
and how many personnel would be required to build the reactors and operate the reactors.
Yeah.
So human resources,
Yeah.
and then the sites that would need to be selected, the amount of investment that would be required, and the kind of system that we need to choose.
Yeah.
We have an excellent background in building a certain type of reactors known as the pressurized heavy water reactors.
Okay.
In fact, the entire reactor is designed within the country. All the components are being made in the country, so it's wholly indigenous.
Okay.
Now, should we go on to build such reactors,
Okay.
or should we go on to build other reactors of a larger capacity,
Yeah.
which would be imported,
Yeah.
or we should go on to build breeder reactors?
Okay.
To what extent we need to do all of these? So this was the attempt that we made,
Okay.
and we found that there is a certain sense in building more pressurized heavy water reactors.
Okay.
There is also a certain need to build a large type of reactors, which would be imported type, because you are able to increase the generation capacity in a shorter time.
Okay.
And there is an urgent need to go on to the fast breeder programs, because I think that is where we can attain a certain amount of energy security.
So you must have come to some sort of conclusion about what are the energy needs that India has, and to what extent the nuclear energy could meet them. And regarding this, what is the common misperception about nuclear energy? Is it too expensive, or can it not be met, or do we have the expertise to have all these reactors built in a certain period of time? And is there a political will? Of course, a lot of questions, but
Now, I think in India, our energy needs are so large.
okay.
We cannot afford to disregard any source of energy.
Yes.
We need to ensure that we go on to build renewable sources of energy.
Okay.
We need also to continue to use coal.
Okay.
We would certainly require oil, because oil meets certain types of needs, like for instance
Vehicles.
transportation
Yeah.
energy requirements.
Yeah.
And we also need to go in for nuclear energy.
Yes.
The renewable sources of energy, in terms of installed capacity, it may appear very large,
Yes.
but in terms of actual energy generated,
Yeah.
I think they are about 1/5 or 1/4 of
Okay.
what a coal-fired power station or a nuclear power station can give you.
Okay.
So I think we need coal and nuclear power
Yes.
to meet large energy needs.
Okay.
We also need to use solar, wind, and various other sources of renewable energy
Yeah.
as and when we require
Required.
it.
Yeah. So the second one would be, I think you already answered this. To what extent can nuclear power plants meet India's energy needs?
Well, I think it's a little difficult to pinpoint the percentage contribution that nuclear can make.
Yeah.
But I would say that maybe we should have about 20 to 30% at least of nuclear energy,
Yeah.
and another 20 to 30% of coal,
Yeah.
and the rest of it should be based on renewable energy sources.
20 to 30%. Is the government starting to think about it? I mean, do something about it? Because if we need that much, something has to be done now.
Well, I think India is a very large country. 20 to 30% would mean a very large number, and if that is the kind of thing that is required, I think we need to go in for an expanded power program in quick time. Certainly, that is.
I hope some policy makers are listening to this and listening to you, and doing something about it. Because
But it is not just the policy makers.
Okay.
I think we need to carry the public along with us.
Okay.
Just a while ago, you mentioned about the public perceptions.
Yes.
And I think we need to also make sure that the public understand
Yeah.
that there is a need for nuclear energy, and
Yeah.
that it can be harnessed sufficiently safely.
Okay. And I think if we have people like you, definitely it will be safe. It's in safe hands. The third one I wanted to ask, based on that book, was, as a result of the Fukushima incident, should the role of nuclear energy be revised or reviewed?
It's a tradition in the nuclear energy industry
Yeah.
to learn from accidents that occur in any part of the world.
Yeah.
Whether you have a similar type of reactor or not,
Yeah.
whether conditions in a country are different from the country in which an accident occurred or not,
Yeah.
there is a provision.
Yeah.
In fact, there is a system
Yeah.
under the auspices of the Indian International Atomic Energy Agency
Yeah.
or the World Association of Nuclear Operators.
Yeah.
The nuclear industry people come together.
Okay.
They exchange information about the incident or accident that has occurred,
Yeah.
and try to learn lessons from that,
Yeah.
and then incorporate those lessons
Yeah.
in the existing reactors as well as in the future designs.
Okay.
This is something that has happened after the Chernobyl accident, this happened after the American reactor accident,
Fukushima,
and this
yeah.
is happening also after the Fukushima accident.
Okay. So people are learning lessons and doing something about it.
Yes.
Yeah. A question that has always intrigued me. What are the consequences of a terrorist crashing a plane against a nuclear reactor? And in this connection, what are the... I don't want to give ideas to terrorists, but what are the various ways that terrorists could cause harm? And is the government taking all these factors into consideration and taking the necessary precautions?
Well, I think even before the World Trade Center accident occurred, the terrorist incident occurred, nuclear reactors were designed to withstand the impact of a certain aircraft. Now the question is what kind of aircraft we choose. So what was being considered was a fighter aircraft, a military aircraft, which crashes onto a nuclear reactor building. Either accidentally or maybe in times of war. But I think as far as war is concerned, there is a certain agreement between India and Pakistan that we will not attack our nuclear installations.
Okay.
So I think we can perhaps leave it at that.
Hopefully that's kept.
When it comes to terrorists, I don't think these agreements would have any impact on the terrorists. Okay. Now you must perhaps remember that a nuclear reactor containment building has a 1 meter thick concrete wall.
Okay.
But it is not just a single wall. And there is an outer wall as well. And the inner wall has an inner steel lining.
Okay.
So it is indeed not going to be possible to impact the reactor core as such.
Okay.
But what can happen is that the cooling of the reactor core could perhaps be affected. And that is where you try to provide for cooling with natural convection. It does not require any power. So that's a kind of system that we are having in some of our reactors, and we plan to improve upon them in the future reactors as well.
Okay.
So I think it should be possible to withstand the impact of an aircraft crash, but that does not necessarily mean that there will be zero release of radioactive material.
Okay.
There will be some degree of radioactive release, but I think that will be within manageable levels.
Okay. What are the other ways? Could they take over a nuclear reactor by just gunning down personnel?
One of the things that the analysts in the rest of the world generally consider is, could it be an insider outsider connivance? Could it be sabotage inside? And I think there again it's a human aspect that one has to look at. It's not the question of an equipment being sabotaged from outside. And here again, I think the management has to keep a constant vigil on the behavior of the operators that it employs. That certainly requires a great deal of vigilance. And of course, I think eternal vigilance is the price that you pay for safety.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. So getting away from nuclear safety, thank you so much. You told us so much about it, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be, they'll know a lot more when they listen to this. What are your other interests in life?
Well, I think my interests have been in trying to learn other languages, and then trying to read about the other countries and their literature, and then the way of life of the people in their own language.
What language
interests you? Well, I studied French and German, and after retirement I studied Japanese.
Oh, very different.
Yes, because I thought Japanese is a very different language. So I thought
is it difficult? Is it difficult?
It's a lot easier than Chinese.
Okay.
But I think if you learn Japanese, it's a little easier to learn Chinese.
Are you planning to learn Chinese?
Well, I would very much like to. As a matter of fact, my concern is that in India, we have very few people who speak Chinese. Now, anything that we know about China is all from the Western eyes. Or somebody else has looked at it and then translated, and then I don't think we have people who study the Chinese language newspapers and then see what's happening. To give you an example, if somebody reads only the English media newspapers in India, he won't get an idea of what's happening in Tamil Nadu. He must read the Tamil newspapers.
The vernacular,
Right. So I think we need to have many people very familiar with Chinese language, and I'm surprised that we have not really paid any attention.
I think the IIT has recently opened a center on Chinese studies.
A large country.
So what you're saying is we should have a lot more, and a lot more people interested. And then we are the second most populous country in the world, I think.
Rather than choose French and Spanish or Italian, I think we should all learn.
And I think China is the next, it already is in many ways the superpower. So we should learn it, and I hope people listening to this,
I think in terms of technology also, whatever the Chinese advances are, I think we should also try to learn about it from the Chinese language itself, rather than a translation from somebody else.
That's really a good suggestion of yours. Any other interests?
Well, I like music. I listen
What
to
sort of music?
classical music.
The classical, okay.
Yes.
Carnatic?
Carnatic classical music.
Do you know a bit?
I don't know. It's like I may not be able to cook, but I appreciate the food.
Okay,
that is cooked.
Kanaiza. You recognize her, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. It's really been a pleasure talking to you. But before I end, I normally end it this way. Do you have anything to say to anyone on anything?
I am reminded of what I was told by an old gentleman.
Okay.
He was a nonagenarian.
Okay.
When I went to him and said, well, I have got this job in this particular department, he
Yeah.
said, excellent, but what I would advise you is simple living, high thinking. And I think that is what I would
Very
advise
good
everybody.
advice. Thank you. And today being Grandparents' Day, I just found out that you are a grandparent. Happy Grandparents' Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.